High Commander Zeth drifted through the council chamber, his form a cascade of pulsating light that shifted between azure and violet. The other council members, 11 beings of similar radiance, arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern, their consciousness vessels humming with power. This sector has remained unexplored for reasons I find increasingly trivial. Zeth addressed the council, his thoughts manifesting as harmonic waves rather than crude sound. Our recent expansions have yielded only primitive carbon-based life forms, barely worth the energy required to catalogue them. Elder Rashin, the oldest among them at nearly 12,000 years, shifted to a deeper shade of indigo. The ancient records suggest stellar anomalies in that region. Perhaps our ancestors had reason for their caution. Our ancestors still wore physical forms and feared death, Zeth replied, a ripple of amusement spreading through his light body. We have transcended such limitations. The central data sphere of the chamber illuminated, displaying a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with the collective's territory highlighted in brilliant gold, nearly 1/6 of the charted universe. The unmarked region at its edge pulsed with an invitation. The motion stands, announced archivalist Samira, her form a delicate lattice of crystalline light. Expansion into Sector 9 Theta 12 is approved by Council mandate. As the vote concluded, a subordinate consciousness entered the chamber, its light pattern displaying the communication signature of urgent information. The lesser Illyrian transmitted data directly to the Council's shared network. Fascinating. Zeth's form brightened with interest. It appears our discussion is fortuitously timed. Sensors have detected an anomalous vessel at the very edge of the proposed sector. The central display shifted to show readings of a spacecraft, solid, material, and seemingly constructed of primitive metals and composites. Yet its energy signature suggested propulsion technology that should be beyond the capabilities of any corporeal species. It appears to be using a crude form of dimensional folding for faster-than-light travel, observed Samira, remarkable for beings still trapped in physical form. Zeth expanded his consciousness pattern, a gesture equivalent to a physical being standing taller. I will personally oversee this investigation. The eternal radiance stands ready in the outer docking ring. We shall make contact and determine whether these creatures merit preservation. Elder Rashin's light dimmed slightly. I sense something different about this encounter. Perhaps we should proceed with greater caution. What could primitive physical beings possibly do to us? Zeth's form pulsed with what might have been laughter millennia ago, when the Illyrians still possessed bodies capable of such expressions. We have evolved beyond harm. Our consciousness vessels can withstand the death of stars. The council chamber dissolved around him as Zeth transferred his consciousness to the eternal radiance. The vessel, if such a terrestrial term could apply to the quantum field manipulation device that housed and transported Illyrian consciousness, began its departure sequence. Aboard the craft, lesser Illyrians prepared for contact protocols, calibrating scanning beams and preparation chambers for the inevitable collection of specimens. None questioned the outcome of the mission. After all, the collective had encountered thousands of species across their long ascension, and none had ever presented a meaningful challenge to their dominion. As the eternal radiance accelerated toward the coordinates, Zeth reviewed the preliminary data again. Something about the vessel's construction principles seemed oddly elegant despite its primitive materials. No matter, soon another species would join the great catalogue of the Illyrian collective, either as willing supplicants or as preserved specimens in the Grand Archive. The journey would take mere hours at quantum-fold velocities. Zeth settled his consciousness into a meditative pattern, untroubled by the passage of time. When one has lived for thousands of years, patience becomes as natural as thought itself. Captain Elena Reyes pressed her palm against the cold viewport glass, watching distant stars streak by as elongated lines of light. 26 months since Earth's evacuation, and the weight of command still pressed heavier on her shoulders with each passing day. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Sato approached with a data tablet. Engineering reports the reactor efficiency has improved by another 3%. Wong's modifications to the cooling system are exceeding expectations. Reyes nodded, her reflection in the glass showing the faint lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when the mission began. Tell him good work. Every bit of efficiency matters when you're carrying the future of an entire species. The bridge of the Defiant hummed with subdued activity. Unlike the sleek, minimalist starships of old science fiction, humanity's last vessel was a monument to pragmatic engineering. Exposed conduits ran along reinforced bulkheads. Redundant systems occupied spaces that might otherwise have provided comfort. Every cubic centimetre served a purpose. Long-range sensors are detecting unusual energy patterns at coordinates 73 Mark IV, reported Senior Officer Park from the science station. Configuration unlike anything in our database. Reyes turned from the viewport. Natural phenomenon. Negative, Captain. The pattern suggests artificial origin. It's moving toward our position at approximately 1/10 our current velocity. Security Director Mbiki rose from her station, her tall frame casting a shadow across the tactical display. Recommend yellow alert status. We should prepare for possible first contact scenario. Agreed, Rita said, straightening her uniform jacket. Inform all department heads. I want defensive systems at standby, but weapon ports remain closed. Let's not make assumptions. The ship's intelligence system chimed softly. Analysis complete. The approaching entity appears to be composed primarily of quantum-entangled particles, maintaining coherence through an unknown mechanism. Conventional matter readings are minimal. Dr. Chen looked up from her cultural database terminal. Captain, this matches nothing in human historical encounters, but several theoretical papers from the Princeton think tank suggested the possibility of post-physical species. Post-physical? Reyes raised an eyebrow. Beings who've transferred their consciousness into energy matrices or quantum substrates, Chen explained. The papers were largely considered speculative, but they theorized such beings might view themselves as godlike compared to corporeal species. Wong's voice came through the communication system. Captain, I've been monitoring the sensor readings. Whatever's approaching us is generating energy levels that should be impossible without a contained neutron star. We're talking about technology thousands of years beyond our own. Reyes settled into the command chair, her face calm despite the implications. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. It's practically our specialty. Around her, the bridge crew continued their duties with the disciplined focus that had become characteristic of the Defiance personnel. These weren't just the best of humanity, they were the last. Each officer represented dozens of candidates who had undergone rigorous testing, training, and psychological evaluation to earn their place on mankind's final voyage. The entity has adjusted course, Park announced. It's now on a direct intercept trajectory. Estimated contact in 17 minutes. All hands. This is the captain. Reyes activated the ship-wide communication system. We are preparing for possible first contact with an unknown species. This is what we've trained for. Remember protocol, remember your duties, and remember what we carry. She didn't need to elaborate. Every person aboard knew the Defiance cargo holds contained frozen embryos representing Earth's biodiversity, seed banks from every continent, and the digitized cultural heritage of a world now fading behind them. They carried humanity's past and its only possible future. "Open a channel on all standard frequencies," Reyes ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves before our visitors make assumptions of their own." The unknown entity grew brighter on the main view screen as the distance between them closed, a swirling vortex of light that defied conventional physics and common sense alike. The rainbow-hued scanning field intensified around the Defiant, creating interference patterns across every view screen. Medical alarms blared from 3 separate decks as crew members collapsed, their neural patterns disrupted by the invasive scan. "Shield modulation is having minimal effect," reported Lieutenant Kaminsky, his fingers flying across the defensive systems console. "They're somehow phasing through our barriers." Captain Reyes kept her eyes fixed on the luminous form of Selanis. The Illyrian commander's appearance had shifted from vaguely humanoid to a complex geometric pattern that pulsed with what seemed like impatience. "You misunderstand your position," Selanis communicated, the translated voice echoing with harmonics that made several bridge officers wince in pain. "This is not a negotiation between equals. The collective has categorized your species as Class 3 physical persistence, beings who have achieved technological advancement while remaining trapped in crude matter." Dr. Patel stumbled onto the bridge, his medical coat stained with blood from attending the injured. "Captain, the scan is causing microhemorrhaging in the visual cortex of affected crew members. It's as if their scanning technology isn't calibrated for biological systems." "Oh, they don't care about the damage," Reyes replied quietly before addressing the Illyrian again. "Selanis, your scanning process is injuring my people. We request an immediate cessation." The geometric pattern spun faster. "Fascinating. Your physical shells experience discomfort from standard information gathering procedures. We will adjust our methods to preserve specimen integrity." The intensity of the scan diminished slightly, but expanded to encompass more of the ship. Engineering reported fluctuations in the power grid as the Illyrian probe interacted with the Defiance systems. "They're accessing our database," the communications officer warned. "Firewalls are failing." Reyes maintained her composed expression despite the escalating crisis. "Selanis, we've shared our identity and mission. In the spirit of mutual understanding, we request information about the Illyrian collective." "Your curiosity is noted and permitted," Selanis responded, the pattern of light shifting to something resembling a display. "The collective achieved transcendence from physical form 4,721 standard cycles ago. We have since expanded to 342 star systems, guiding lesser species toward eventual evolution. Those who demonstrate sufficient potential may serve the collective for several generations before receiving the gift of partial uplift." Security Director Mbeki leaned close to Reyes. "They're talking about slavery, Captain. Generational servitude in exchange for technological scraps." "And those without sufficient potential?" Reyes asked. Selanis's form brightened. "Biological specimens are preserved in our eternal archives. Mechanical technologies are analyzed and repurposed. Non-viable species are allowed to follow their natural extinction paths. It is the most efficient system for universal advancement." The ship's intelligence system reported through Reyes's command interface. Analysis of communication patterns indicates extreme age of speaker entity, estimated minimum 2,000 years of continuous existence based on linguistic drift patterns. Reyes straightened in her chair. The people of Earth respect your collective's achievements, but we must decline your offer of guidance. We seek only peaceful passage through this region as we search for a new homeworld. The luminous form pulsed with what the translation matrix interpreted as amusement. Your consent is appreciated but unnecessary. Classification and processing have already begun. Your vessel's propulsion system shows remarkable innovation for physical beings. This technology will be adapted to serve the collective. Warning lights flashed across the engineering console as external systems began to power down. The Illyrian scan had penetrated to the Defiance drive systems and was systematically disabling control mechanisms. All hands, prepare for emergency protocol Sierra 9. Reyes announced, her calm voice belying the gravity of the situation. Sierra 9 was the code for imminent hostile takeover. The crew had practiced it, but never expected to implement it against beings who considered themselves gods. The Illyrian vessel drew closer, extending luminous tendrils that sought connection points on the Defiant's hull. Throughout the ship, crew members raced to secure vital systems and prepare for the unthinkable, combat against an apparently divine enemy. Selenis's voice resonated through the ship's communication system. Your resistance is noted for the archives. It will make an interesting footnote in the evolutionary history of your species. Dr. Sanjay Patel hunched over his laboratory console, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Illyrian scanning patterns. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but the adrenaline coursing through his system kept fatigue at bay. 23 crew members were now in medical stasis, their brains unable to process the alien intrusion. There, he muttered, isolating a specific frequency pattern. It's not continuous energy at all. He transferred the findings to a secure terminal, isolated from the ship's main systems. The Illyrians had already penetrated too deeply into their network to risk sharing discoveries through standard channels. The lab door slid open as Chief Engineer Wong entered, carrying a damaged component. Tell me you found something. They'd bypassed 3 more firewall layers. Patel pointed to the isolated waveform. They're not energy beings, at least not in the way we initially thought. Their consciousness exists as coherent quantum information matrices housed in specialized containment fields. The light we're seeing is a byproduct of the quantum field maintaining coherence. Wong placed the damaged component under a scanner, so they're essentially uploaded minds. Advanced A. Not exactly. More like transferred consciousness, original organic minds that have been digitized and preserved in quantum states. The evolutionary advantage they're so proud of is technological, not biological. The ship's intelligence system sent a priority notification to their terminal, correlating with historical database. Quantum consciousness transfer was theorized by Dr. Eliza Chamberlain in 2089. Project was abandoned due to ethical concerns regarding consciousness fragmentation. Wong examined the data, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization. If they're maintained by coherent quantum fields, then significant field disruption cooled. Fragment their consciousness, Patel finished. Essentially the equivalent of injury or death to beings who've forgotten what those concepts mean. In the shielded war room 2 decks below, Captain Reyes assembled her senior staff around a table containing physical maps and paper notes, technology so primitive the Illyrians had dismissed it as irrelevant to their scanning. The Eon shielding in this room is buying us time, but not much, she informed them. Our visitors are systematically disabling our systems and preparing to board. Security Director Mbiki placed a tactical display on the table. We've armed all personnel with standard weapons, but they're unlikely to affect beings of energy. They're not pure energy, Patel announced as he and Wong entered the room. He quickly explained his discovery about the Illyrians' true nature. Dr. Chen, the ship's historian, looked up from an ancient paper book she'd been referencing. This matches patterns from Earth's mythology. Beings who achieved godhood through technology rather than divine right. They became so powerful they forgot their origins. And their vulnerabilities, Wong added, placing the damaged component on the table. When their scanning beam hit this electromagnetic regulator, I noticed fluctuations in their coherence pattern. Their quantum matrices are sensitive to certain EM frequencies. The ship's intelligence system, operating through a secured portable terminal, displayed a series of calculations. Analysis complete. Illyrian quantum matrices show vulnerability to modulated electromagnetic pulse patterns at frequencies between 438.2 and 441.7 THz. The EMP weapons, Rias said, her eyes widening slightly. Our last-generation electromagnetic pulse weapons might affect them. Wong nodded grimly. They were designed to disable autonomous war machines during Earth's final conflicts. If we modify them to target the specific frequencies of the Illyrian consciousness matrices, we could disrupt their coherence, Patel finished. In human terms, we could hurt them. Reyes stood, her decision made. Wong, begin modifications to our EMP systems. Mbeki, prepare defensive positions in case they manage to board. Dr. Chen, continue searching historical records for any tactical advantages. And Dr. Patel, find me a way to protect our crew from their scanning technology. The officers dispersed with newfound purpose. For the first time since contact, there was a glimmer of hope, not just for survival, but for resistance. On the bridge, the luminous form of Solanis continued to probe the ship's systems, unaware that the primitives had discovered the truth behind their godhood. The Illyrian pressed deeper into the Defiance network, certain of victory, while beneath decks, humanity prepared to challenge divinity itself. Chief Engineer Wong's hands moved with practiced precision as he calibrated the last of the modified EMP emitters. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the environmental controls that kept the engineering bay at optimal temperature. Around him, his team worked in focused silence, converting standard electromagnetic pulse generators into weapons specifically tuned to disrupt Illyrian quantum matrices. Final calibration complete, he announced, closing the access panel on the device. Target frequency locked at 440.3 THz. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from her workstation. Deployment systems ready. We can channel the pulse through the ship's external communication array or launch it via modified probes. The ship's intelligence system flashed a warning on Wong's terminal. Illyrian scanning has penetrated to deck Steed Life's support systems compromised in sectors 7 through 12. Wong tapped his communication badge. Engineering to bridge. Captain, we're ready. On the command deck, Captain Reyes stood before the swirling geometric pattern that represented Solanis. The Illyrian commander had grown more insistent, the translated voice taking on harmonics that caused the bridge crew to wince in discomfort. Your species demonstrates unusual resistance to standard processing, Solanis communicated. This has elevated your classification to potential Type B servitors rather than simple archival specimens. The collective will permit limited autonomy during your service period. Reyes met the pulsing light pattern with a steady gaze. We've studied your scanning technology, Solanis. You're not gods. You're transferred consciousness housed in quantum matrices, advanced technology, but technology nonetheless. For the first time, the Illyrian's pattern showed disruption, brief flickering in its perfect geometric arrangement. Your primitive understanding is incomplete. We have transcended biological limitations. We are eternal." "Nothing is eternal," Reyes replied, "and nothing is invulnerable." She nodded to Communications Officer Park, who activated a subvocal command to the ship's systems. Throughout the Defiant, non-essential power systems suddenly went offline, creating a momentary power fluctuation that drew the Illyrians' attention. The diversion worked. Selenis's consciousness focused on the power anomaly, extending scanning tendrils deeper into the ship's systems to investigate the fluctuation. Now, reabsorbed. Wong activated the modified EMP system from engineering. The pulse began building, channeled through specially isolated conduits toward the ship's communication array. The lights dimmed as power was diverted to the weapon. Selenis's form brightened with what might have been concern. "Your vessel is exhibiting power anomalies. The collective can provide superior energy management systems once you..." The pulse fired. Invisible to human eyes but devastating to quantum matrices, the electromagnetic wave swept through the Illyrian vessel. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Selenis's perfect geometric form shattered into fragments of light, swirling chaotically as coherence was lost. A sound unlike anything human ears had ever perceived echoed through the communications system, something between a scream and the digital distortion of corrupted data. "What have you done?" The translated voice fragmented into multiple overlapping versions, each tinged with something the Illyrians had supposedly evolved beyond fear. On the view screen, the eternal radiance's perfect symmetry distorted as portions of its structure collapsed inward. Brilliant flares of energy erupted from its surface as containment fields failed. "Their vessel is suffering cascading system failures," reported Science Officer Kaminsky. "The EMP disrupted their quantum matrices more effectively than our models predicted." Reyes leaned forward. "Target their propulsion systems. Prevent them from escaping." A second pulse fired, this one delivered via probe launched directly at the Illyrian vessel's midsection. When it detonated, the disruption spread visibly through the energy ship, leaving darkness in its wake. Selenis's fractured consciousness struggled to maintain communication. Impossible. Physical beings cannot. The collective will. The collective will learn that humanity is not to be underestimated. Reyes replied, her voice carrying the weight of every human who had fought against overwhelming odds throughout history. "We may be primitives to you, but we've been fighting for survival since we first walked upright on our world." The Illyrian vessel began to retreat, trailing particles of disintegrating consciousness like wounded prey leaving a blood trail. For the first time in millennia, the self-proclaimed gods knew pain and fear. The High Council chamber of the Illyrian collective erupted into chaos, or what passed for chaos among beings who had supposedly evolved beyond emotion. The perfect geometric arrangement of consciousness vessels dissolved as council members, projected overlapping communication patterns. "Impossible," declared archivalist Samira, her light form flickering between frequencies. "No corporeal species has ever damaged an ascended vessel." Elder Rashin's consciousness expanded, commanding attention, and yet the evidence stands before us. The evidence was indeed undeniable. In the center of the chamber, Selenis's consciousness flickered weakly, sustained by emergency stabilization fields. Nearly 40% of his quantum matrix had been irretrievably lost, the closest thing to death an Illyrian had experienced in thousands of years. High Commander Zeth circled the damaged consciousness, his own form pulsing with an emotion long forgotten by their kind: rage. These humans have committed the ultimate sacrilege. Zet's communication reverberated through the collective awareness. They have presumed to strike at the divine. They have revealed we are not divine, Ration countered, earning shocked reactions from the younger council members. They have discovered the fundamental truth of our existence. We are advanced, but not immortal. Zeth's form brightened to nearly painful intensity. I will lead the punitive expedition personally. 5 warships will accompany the luminous vengeance. We will capture this human vessel and extract every particle of data about their weapons. Then we will systematically erase their consciousness patterns, as they have attempted to do to Selenis. No council member opposed his declaration. The attack on Selenis had shaken the collective to its foundations. The mythology they had constructed around themselves, their godhood, their invulnerability, had been challenged by beings they considered little more than clever animals. The damaged vessel reported unusual properties in their propulsion system, Celera noted. We should prioritize capture of this technology. Agreed, Zeph replied. Prepare consciousness extraction chambers for their leadership. The rest will be catalogued and preserved according to standard protocols. As the council dispersed to prepare for war, Elder Rashin remained, his ancient consciousness contemplating the wounded Selenis. After ensuring no others remained within range of his communication, he addressed the injured commander. What was it like? Rashin asked. His communication narrowed to a private channel. The fragmentation. Selenis's weakened pattern fluctuated. Pain. I have forgotten pain existed. And something else. Fear. Fear of non-existence. How do physical beings endure such awareness? Perhaps that is precisely why they were able to harm us, Rashin replied. They remember what we have forgotten. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Reyes assessed the damage from their encounter while planning their next move. The ship's medical bay overflowed with injured crew, many suffering neurological damage from the Illyrian scanning. The nebula ahead contains abnormally high concentrations of ionized particles, Science Officer Kaminsky reported. It might mask our signature from their sensors. Security Director Mbiki shook her head. It also blinds our sensors. We'd be flying blind. Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain blindness, Reyes replied. Plot a course into the nebula, maximum sustainable speed. In the research lab, Dr. Patel examined data collected during their encounter with the Illyrian vessel. The ship's intelligence system processed billions of calculations, seeking patterns that might provide additional tactical advantages. I've been analyzing the quantum signature fragments we collected from their vessel, Patel told the assembled senior staff. There's something remarkable about their consciousness structure. They've eliminated the neural pathways associated with pain, fear, and mortality awareness. They deleted their own survival instincts, Dr. Chen observed. From an evolutionary perspective, that's suicide. Wong nodded. It explains their reaction to the EMP. They experienced something they haven't felt in thousands of years, the fear of ending. And we've just killed one of their kind for the first time in millennia. Reyes noted grimly. We should expect a significant response. As if confirming her words, the long-range sensors chimed an alert. The intelligence system displayed a tactical projection showing multiple energy signatures approaching from Illyrian space. 6 vessels, Mbeki announced, all significantly larger than the one we encountered. Reyes studied the tactical display, her expression resolute. They believe themselves gods. Now they're coming for retribution. Prepare all stations for extreme combat conditions. This is no longer about first contact. It's about survival. The nebula enveloped the Defiant in swirling clouds of ionized gas, casting the bridge in an eerie violet glow. Visibility extended barely 100 meters beyond the hull, while sensor readings dissolved into static and ghost images. For a vessel designed to navigate the precise calculations of interstellar space, this blind flight represented the ultimate test of human skill. Maintaining course through Density Pocket Alpha, Lieutenant Sato reported, her hands dancing across manual controls rarely used in normal space, navigating by stellar gravimetric echoes. Captain Reyes nodded approval. The nebula's composition, rich in radioactive isotopes and magnetically charged particles, created a natural labyrinth that might confuse even the advanced sensors of the Illyrian warships. But it also left the Defiant flying practically blind, dependent on the skills of its crew rather than automated systems. Engineering reports probe network is ready for deployment, Communications Officer Park announced. 26 units modified with enhanced EMP generators. Reyes studied the tactical display where the approaching Illyrian formation appeared as ghostly outlines at the nebula's edge. They had halted their advance, clearly hesitant to enter the swirling chaos that now sheltered the human vessel. They're sending communications pulses into the nebula, Science Officer Kaminsky reported. Standard protocols, translated as surrender demands. Let's give them a different kind of answer, Reyes decided. Transmit historical package alpha. Park's fingers activated a carefully prepared data stream. Unlike standard communication, this transmission contained compressed historical records of human warfare, from ancient battles to space conflicts, showing humanity's long experience with fighting against superior forces. Transmission sent, but the nebula is degrading signal integrity, Park confirmed. On the command deck of the Luminous Vengeance, High Commander Zeth observed the fragmented transmission with growing irritation. His consciousness vessel expanded as the human historical records played before the assembled Illyrian commanders. They send us primitive violence records, Zeth communicated to his subordinates, as if tales of barbarism would deter us. Yet something in the transmission gave him pause, the sheer variety of combat scenarios, the endless adaptation to different threats, the persistent survival against overwhelming odds. The Illyrians had forgotten what it meant to truly fight, to face extinction and still prevail. They hide in the nebula like prey, he declared, dismissing his momentary concern. We shall flush them out. Dispatch scanning probes to locate their vessel. Back aboard the Defiant, Wong monitored the deployment of their own specialized probes from engineering. Probe network activating in sequence, Captain. EMP capacitors charging. The human probes, unlike their Illyrian counterparts, were designed not for scanning but for ambush. Each contained a modified electromagnetic pulse generator tuned precisely to disrupt Illyrian quantum matrices. They drifted silently through the nebula, camouflaged by the surrounding radiation and charged particles. Illyrian vessels are entering the nebula perimeter, Security Director Mbiki reported. 5 ships in standard search pattern. The flagship remains at the edge. Reyes nodded. They're being cautious. Good. Execute maneuver, Sparrow. The Defiance engines fired in precise, calculated bursts. Instead of fleeing deeper into the nebula, the ship executed a sweeping turn, bringing it around in a wide arc that would position it behind the searching Illyrian vessels. The nebula's radiation is masking our engine's signature, Kaminsky confirmed. They haven't detected our change in course. Throughout the ship, crew members moved with the coordinated precision born from countless drills. Medical teams prepared for casualties. Engineering crews maintained the delicate balance of systems stressed by the nebula's radiation. Weapons specialists monitored the probe network, waiting for optimal detonation conditions. First Illyrian vessel approaching Probe Cluster 3. Wong reported from engineering. Optimal disruption range in 15 seconds. Reyes took a deep breath. Humanity has never surrendered its future to gods, real or imagined. We won't start now. Initiate detonation sequence. The first probe activated, sending a carefully tuned electromagnetic pulse washing over the lead Illyrian vessel. The effect was immediate. The perfect cohesion of the energy ship distorted as quantum matrices destabilized. A second pulse followed, then a third, creating a cascading disruption effect that tore through the Illyrian consciousness vessels like digital wildfire. One standard cycle after the Nebula battle, High Commander Zeth's damaged consciousness vessel limped into the sacred space of the Illyrian homeworld. Where 5 warships had departed, only one returned, and that lone survivor carried barely a third of its original consciousness complement. The rest had been fragmented beyond recovery, lost to the void in a manner the collective had not experienced since their ascension millennia ago. The Grand Assembly convened immediately, 15,000 senior consciousness vessels gathering in a perfect geometric lattice that spanned 20 kilometers of open space. At its center, Zeth's damaged form pulsed weakly, sustained by emergency quantum stabilizers. The humans escaped, Zeth reported, his communication patterns distorted by damage. They deployed weapons precisely calibrated to disrupt our consciousness matrices. 4 vessels lost with all consciousness fragments. 87% of my accompanying consciousness collective destroyed or irreparably damaged. A ripple of dissonance spread through the assembly, the Illyrian equivalent of shock and horror. Elder Rashin approached the center of the formation, his ancient consciousness vessel glowing with the wisdom of 12,000 years. We face an unprecedented situation, Rashin communicated to the assembly. A physical species has developed the means to cause true death to the ascended. The mythology we have built around ourselves, our godhood, our invulnerability, has been challenged. Archivalist Samira pulsed with agitation. We should mobilize the entire collective fleet, find these humans, and eradicate them completely. And risk losing more of our kind, countered Rashin. Each consciousness lost is irreplaceable. Knowledge and experience, dating back thousands of years, gone forever. The assembly fell into contemplative silence. For beings who had considered themselves immortal, the concept of permanent loss had become foreign, until now. I propose a quarantine designation, Rashin finally communicated. Seal off the human territory. Designate their species as Nemesis class. Approach forbidden. The motion passed with near anonymity, fear overcoming pride for perhaps the first time in Illyrian history. Across the galaxy, beyond Illyrian space, the Defiant emerged from its final faster-than-light jump, battered but unbroken. Ahead lay a solar system with a promising third planet, atmosphere breathable, gravity tolerable, biosphere compatible with Earth organisms. Sensors confirm preliminary habitability assessment. Science Officer Kaminsky reported, exhaustion evident in his voice after weeks of constant vigilance. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, abundant fresh water, moderate climate patterns. Captain Reyes stood before the main viewport, watching the blue-green world grow larger. Begin orbital survey. Prepare landing parties for soil and water testing. The bridge crew exchanged glances of cautious hope. After months of running, fighting, and surviving against impossible odds, they had found a potential home. 6 months later, the first human settlement took root on the world they named Nova Terra. The Defiant remained in orbit, converted to a sentinel station and memorial combined. From its observation deck, Captain Reyes watched the lights of the colony appear as dusk fell across the main settlement. The Illyrians haven't followed, Security Director Mbiki noted as she joined Reyes at the viewport. Long-range sensors show no signs of pursuit. They learned something they'd forgotten, Reyes replied. The fear of ending. Below them, the colony flourished. The first crops sprouted in experimental fields. Temporary shelters gave way to permanent structures. Children born during the voyage took their first steps on solid ground. Humanity had found its new beginning. In a secured vault within the settlement's central archives, Dr. Chen carefully preserved fragments of the Illyrian consciousness recovered from the battle, crystalline structures that pulsed with fading light. Around them, she had assembled records of the encounter, creating a historical exhibit for future generations. The gods who weren't. Read the simple inscription at the entrance, alongside the recovered transmission from the Illyrian Quarantine Order, designating humans as a Nemesis-class species. Across the stars, other civilizations received fragments of information about the conflict, whispered data streams, and fragmented sensor readings that spread from world to world. A new myth began to form among species long dominated by the collective, the tale of beings who challenged gods and revealed their mortality. On Nova Terra, as the first generation of native-born humans grew, they looked to the stars with neither fear nor arrogance, but with the balanced perspective that had saved their species, the understanding that true strength comes not from claiming divinity, but from embracing the precious fragility of existence itself.